I'm delighted to welcome today Tony Redondo from the award-winning 𝗂𝗵𝗁 Currency Exchange. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you very much, Elaine. Thank you for having me on.
Let's start at the end and work backwards. What did you get awards for? That's very snazzy, isn't it? Well, what are the awards for?
Yeah, well, no, we're very happy with those awards because they hit at the heart of what 𝗂𝗵𝗁 is all about and why I started a business with impeccable timing on my part in 2020, just before the first lockdown, but that's another story. But they're for customer service, excellent customer service, and for a best proactive currency broker. And that's really important because there ain't many proactive options available to clients these days. Most clients are stuck with going to the bank or looking up an app, and the rate is what it is, and you take it or you don't take it. And we try and be a little bit more scientific by monitoring the markets and alerting clients to opportunities as and when they arise within their chosen time frame.
Very good. I hadn't heard of that. Well, to be honest, I hadn't heard much about currency exchange. I've not been in a position where I've had oodles of money to, fly around the world in my jet-setting life. So, are there any particular things to look out for? I mean, when you're giving guidance to people, I suppose it depends on their circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are certain things that are fundamental, like in any sector, in any industry. So the three fundamentals that always affect exchange rates are economic factors, political factors, and human sentiment. The easiest one, it's not easy, but the easiest one out of the three to take a gauge, because it's the most scientific one, is the economic factors. So, for instance, when inflation is high, like it is at the moment, we have a 30-year high inflation rate in the UK and a 40-year high inflation rate in the United States, then typically the central bank will increase interest rates to make borrowing more expensive to calm the economy down and get inflation under control. Likewise, when inflation is very low, they will lower interest rates to make it cheaper for people to borrow to stimulate economic activity. So it's not an exact science because there's human beings involved, but it's a good rule of thumb. The markets have been in complete turmoil for a while now, simply because politics have dominated economics of late, with first of all the Brexit referendum in June 16, and then a long period of negotiations and shenanigans at Westminster and in Brussels, and then the election of Trump. So politics is very difficult to gauge because you never know what politician is going to say what when, but it has a material effect. And then human sentiment. So when the markets are buoyant and everybody's positive and buy, that favors certain currencies, the more high-risk currencies that are more dependent on individual factors like the Canadian dollar, which is largely driven by oil prices. So it's a great time to sell Canadian dollars right now because oil prices are so high. The Australian dollar, the South African rand, if gold prices are high. When the markets are running scared at times of war or tsunamis or political or natural earthquakes or what have you, then the reverse is true. Everybody pulls their money out of riskier assets and goes into so-called safe haven assets. Typically in the currency markets, they will be the US dollar, the Japanese yen, and the Swiss franc, in that order. The dollar's the ultimate safe haven currency because everything is priced in dollars. All commodities are priced in dollars. So even if you have no direct interest or involvement with the US economy, if you're buying any commodity, whether it's soft commodities like food, raw materials, or hard commodities like metals and the oils, everything is priced in dollars. So the US dollar is involved in 88% of all currency transactions in the world, one way or another.
Very interesting. I understood every word of that. Thank you. I was hopeless at school. We did economics, and I didn't know one then from another. And every time I thought I'd got the hang of it, I was completely wrong, and I'd got everything muddled, to the point where I used to bunk off school such a lot. I used to go around to the local cemetery where nobody could find me, and I used to be reading the tombstones, particularly the old family ones. We've got these great long poems and things.
Okay.
So that's what I did in well, it's East London now, but it was 𝗄𝗵𝗃 in Essex. That's where I was brought up.
Okay. Oh my God!
And that's a link to you because
you were round the corner from me.
Exactly. That's why I mention it, because you were raised. Well, you lived a lot of your life in East London. So take us back to where you were actually born, Tony, because you weren't born in the UK, were you? Tell us a bit about your early days.
No, I was. Yeah, I've been a traveller all my life, I guess. I guess I was destined for the currency markets, dealing with all over the world, given my background. No, I was born in Mozambique in Africa in the 1960s. At the time, it was a Portuguese colony. And we were a mere 50 kilometres from Kruger National Park on the South African border, which is very famous and always has been for people going, the tourist trade, with people going on safaris there. To give you some idea of dimension, Kruger is just one of many national parks in South Africa. It's about the size of Wales, one national park.
Wow. It's
about the size of Wales. And it was 50 kilometers down the road. So a lot of my childhood holidays, we lived 200 yards from the Indian Ocean in Lourenço Marques, which is now called Maputo, the capital of Mozambique, where the water temperature is 23 degrees year round. And the air temperature is 26 degrees year round. So I had a pretty idyllic first 8 years of my life, where I was 200 yards away from the Indian Ocean and constant sunshine. And holidays, we went to the Victoria Falls in what is now Zimbabwe, was then Rhodesia. And we would go to Kruger National Park, and that sparked my lifelong interest in cosmology, hence the name Cosmos, currency exchange. Because to stop me, I've always been curious sort, and to stop me running off into the bush because I'd heard some sound or thought I saw something, my parents would put some blankets up on the roof of their Volkswagen Beetle, and my godfather would sit up there with me, pointing out all the constellations. And I just thought it was just wonderful, but it's only many years later that I realized why it was so wonderful. The tilt of the Earth means that southern hemisphere points towards the middle of the Milky Way, whereas we in the UK are in the northern hemisphere, point away from it. So for every one star we see, there's hundreds in the southern hemisphere. So it's just like a canopy. So I was always mesmerized, and luckily for me, my godfather was very knowledgeable. So he would point out all the constellations, and that's where Mars is and that's where Venus is, and they're the two that you usually can see with the naked eye. So yeah, to me, it was just endlessly fascinating, all that stuff.
How interesting. Every day is a school day, which I say, but every sentence is a lesson with you. Absolutely amazing. Wonderful. So 8 years then you were in this wonderful idyllic setup. So what happened then? Where did you travel to?
Then life took an interesting turn, shall we say. What happens to all of us, doesn't it, one sort or another? But yeah, life was great. And then there was the Portuguese Revolution in April '74, which overthrew a 50-year fascist dictatorship. So the Portuguese dictator Salazar long outlived Hitler and Mussolini, didn't quite outlive Franco in next door Spain. But overnight, after 50 years of fascism, the communists took over and gave away the colonies overnight. So we were evacuated out under military escort, went back to Portugal. Portugal is a small country. To give you some perspective, there's nearly as many people in London as there are in the whole of Portugal.
That amuses me, and that's another reason. That's one reason why I like living here, because there's not all the hordes and ants crawling around. When I think back to my life when I was commuting in the UK in the city of London, I think, oh my God, compared to my life now, it's just amazing. Yeah, so
I could well imagine.
So you went to Portugal.
Out of the city of London myself for 70 years, I can well imagine. But yeah, we were evacuated out, so we were back to Portugal. But then there was loads of people going back from all the Portuguese colonies, so Mozambique, Angola, Cape Verde, Goa in India, Timor in Indonesia. and the country couldn't cope, and there weren't many jobs available, and there was all kinds of issues. So my parents tried and tried and tried to get settled in and then move on with our lives. And one day went to downtown Lisbon and went into the British, Australian and Canadian embassies for visas. The first one to come through was the British visa. So without a word of English between the four of us, we landed at Heathrow Airport on the 25th of January, 1975.
Wow.
Which was a bit of a culture shock for me, because this 8-year-old boy at the time had never seen snow, didn't know what cold was, had never worn a coat, didn't even know scarf and gloves and hats existed, didn't wear trousers, hadn't worn socks. And then all of a sudden we land at Heathrow Airport in January.
Gosh.
Which is a bit of a shock to the system, shall we say.
Gosh, that's amazing. And how do you feel now, many years later? Those memories must have really shaped your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes I think it's almost better to have no choice, and you just have to get on with it. You know, so my parents emigrated. As difficult as it might have been for an 8-year-old and my 5-year-old sister to go to school not knowing a word of English, you know, I always think about it from the perspective of my parents. You know, my father was a banker in Africa. His qualifications weren't recognized in the UK. He ended up washing up plates in a hotel. My mum was a seamstress, ended up working in East End sweatshops at 10p a skirt, 20p a blouse. And they had it really, really tough. Really tough. You know, I remember them going various years with 3 jobs each. And when one came in, one came out, and we had the luxury of being shown the way to school once, and then we were on our own. And it all sounds very dramatic, and that, but at the time, just as a child, I think you just get on with it.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
You know, you just literally get on with it. And it wasn't easy. You know, the East End of London has always been a rough and tumble kind of place, and it certainly was in the 1970s with the sort of National Front and the Irish hunger strikes and everything else going on at the time. But you just get on with it, and luckily I was reasonably good at sports, so that was my in with a local, with my schoolmates, and we just got on with it. But I think that health-wise, in a way, it's always found it fascinating how things work out, Elaine, because I wasn't used to the weather and the dampness, and you know, we lived in rented accommodation for a while, and then we got a council estate place in Hackney. And first thing I did when I came to the UK is get bronchitis. And then I recovered from that and got chickenpox. So even though we landed in January, I didn't actually even start school until June. So I only caught the last 4 weeks of primary school, and then I was straight into secondary school. So the bonus of that is I was bedridden for all those months. So my dad would bring home day-old newspapers like the Telegraph and the Times, bought me a big old Portuguese, English, Portuguese dictionary. And I would literally sit there and go word by word, and then have the radio on in the background to try and get a sound of the words. And then got into books that I've always loved reading. So all the classic books that I'd read in Portuguese, I started reading in English because I knew the story, and that helped me kind of like word associate.
Yeah.
So, you know, the Treasure Islands and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I love Jules Verne and those kind of things. And then I found the magic of Roald Dahl. And if I have to point to any one thing that helped me learn English, is Mr. Roald Dahl. He's responsible.
Bless, yeah.
Because I just love his imagination.
I identified with him. James and the Giant Peach and Matilda and so on. Yeah, I remember those with my children.
My favourite is George's Marvellous Medicine. because I just love the idea. That's the kind of thing I would be, you know, I would have got involved in as a kid, you know. I wonder what happens if I mix this with this.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. So growing up then in Hackney, I know the area very well. My first husband's family from all around there, Hoxton and just around. I didn't know that the place was actually spelt with an H, because they're East End. You know, 𝗁𝗪𝗲, salt of the earth governor and all this business, you know. And I thought it was Oxton, but it's only in recent years I've discovered Hoxton, and I believe all the area now is really quite expensive and
it's very,
you know, very
posh. No, very posh.
Yeah.
It's funny because I started many years later. I went into banking and I started working in the City of London, and we were on the eastern fringe of the City of London, so we were behind Broadgate Circus.
Yes.
Just behind Liverpool Street.
Yeah. Oh, that's all very up there now, isn't it?
Exactly. But at the time, we got taken over. We were in the West End first, and then we got taken over and moved there. And sorry, Elaine. Apologies for that. Before I switched the phone off. For one side, you had Liverpool Street and the Bank of England and the London Stock Exchange and the Square Mile. And then the other side, going towards Hoxton and Clerkenwell and Farringdon, you had warehouses full of pigeons, because they were the old tannery and leather and tobacco factories. And they had a restrictive clause in them that they couldn't be converted to residential. They had to have an employment clause. But the problem was the ceiling to floor height wasn't big enough to have the false ceilings and false floors for the trunking for all the computers for offices. So nobody could make it work. So they were just full of pigeons for dozens and dozens and dozens of years, until some bright spark came out with the concept of live-work units, where, you know, you could have dentists and architects and estate agents working from these places. But it was a complete nonsense. It was just a normal house with an extra couple of PowerPoints, but he enabled the local authority to have a fig leaf and say, these are live-work units, they're not residential. But then all of a sudden the area took off, and so within a 3-year period in the late 80s, early 90s, Hoxton went from pigeon-infested warehouses to £150 a square foot. A square foot is the size of a normal waste paper bin. So it's just incredible. God knows what the property prices are now, but I'm going back to the early 1990s. But I was involved in quite a lot of those property development projects.
How interesting.
It was really interesting
for
me.
I was involved with I had a kitchen business, so the late 70s to the mid 80s. I was always up in those areas. I flitted between Harrods and the East End, and I can walk along the Thames and show you all the buildings that we converted and put kitchens in. So it's wonderful. Yeah. So we may even have passed one another, and I worked in my mid 80s when things went wrong. I went to work for a firm of I worked for various different firms of accountants and lawyers. And at one time I was very close to Broadgate Circus that you just mentioned.
Oh wow! We must have done.
I was in Dominion Street, just behind Liverpool Street Station.
And
when I first started travelling, I left school. I was barely 16 when I left school. I just walked out one day and never went back. And got myself a job in London, and it was still steam trains going into what was Broad Street Station.
Wow!
So and that was 1975. So when you were arriving at Heathrow, I was travelling on the steam train.
It's fun, isn't it?
It is. It is.
Amazing. Life's twists and turns.
So what happened then? So you went to secondary school. You were pretty okay with sport. What sort of sports did you play?
All kinds of things, but the main ones is athletics, basketball, football, cricket, and a little bit of rugby. So quite involved, and very, very high density areas, very ethnic area. In fact, my nickname at school at the time was Spot, because I was the only white member of the school sports teams.
Oh my word! So you were the white spot in the middle. Oh my goodness!
The lights, I was a spot of white light.
Oh, for goodness sake. Oh, how funny. Well, I say how funny. I mean, if you mention that in certain company now, you'd be accused of being racist.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, it's
But, you know, it's
ridiculous.
meant totally positively because, you know, one of the ways I managed to survive, because I hated school dinners, you know, I was used to Portuguese cooking, African cooking, you know, where, I mean, literally, this sounds like a Hollywood movie, but when I was a kid in Africa, if you got hungry on the beach, you just climbed a tree and grabbed a banana or a mango or a papaya or a passion fruit or something or other, you know, literally. And then all of a sudden I was in the concrete jungle. But because I had so many friends that were West Indian, again, like yourself, I wasn't very keen on school other than my favorite subjects and sports. So I would bunk off, and then the West Indian grandmothers would feed me. So I grew up on goat curry and rice and peas and ackee and saltfish and all that lovely stuff.
Nice. Goodness me.
And,
so you left school and you went into the bank.
I left school with no qualifications. I hate, you know, I wasn't got fed up with all the aggro all of the time, and then I went to college, and all of a sudden, you know, it's interesting. I left school and took my school uniform off, and had the summer 6-week holidays, and then I went into a college where I'd gone from 15 to 16 because my birthday's in August, but I could then wear what I wanted, civilian clothes, and I was treated like an adult. And the college was in King's Cross, so again, not exactly, you know, Eton or Oxbridge, you know, it was King's Cross, you know, and you know London very well. So you got off at King's Cross station and you either had a huge walk around Pentonville Road, or you cut across Argyle Square, which was quite famous at the time for reasons I won't mention on this podcast.
Yes. I'm sure listeners will get the message. If not, look it up.
But all of a sudden, I was, you know, you were treated like an adult, and you were asked questions, and you weren't told what to do, everything. And a year later, I had 10 O levels, and 2 years later, I had 4 A levels.
Goodness.
And then I thought, what I really wanted to do with my life, Elaine, is do something to do with space studies, do astrophysics or cosmology or planetary studies or something. But hello, we got
Bobby. Bobby the cat's appeared. Yeah, he often does. He often appears in podcasts and webinars and things.
Absolutely, brilliant. Oh, I love the name. My again, going back to Hackney days, when I was a teenager, we had an Alsatian bull, Bobby. And he was so strong that after 6 months, I was the only one who could walk him, because otherwise he was just so strong. But I love Alsatians because they're so intelligent and so dopey and funny and all the rest of it. But so I knew, but going into space studies meant going to university. And there was no way my parents could afford for me to go to university, not a chance. You know, it was one of those very clear-cut decisions. It wasn't even worth considering because there was nothing to think about. So I thought to myself, okay, well, what am I going to do then? So I thought, well, and then I got lucky because at the age of 19, it was 1985, and then there was Big Bang in the City of London, and all the foreign banks came in. Beforehand, the City of London was a bit of a closed shop, and you had to be invited in. Which means you needed contacts, which I certainly didn't have, coming from Hackney, and not Eton. And but all of a sudden, the foreign banks came in, and they needed staff. So I thought, well, at least it's working with numbers. And so that was my career decision done to go into banking. There's nothing more, you know, scientific than that. It was just best alternative choice if I couldn't really do what I wanted to do.
And that's led you over the years to this amazing business that you now run, which is extremely unique.
Yeah, it's again, it's one of those interesting things. You know, when I started in 1985, what that actually means, looking back with the benefit of hindsight, is for the first sort of 15 years of my career, Elaine, there were no computers and there was no internet. So business was done the only way business had been done for the previous 400 years since the original coffee houses in the City of London. And that's relationship-based business models, where people talk to one another.
Oh gosh, imagine that today, goodness.
Actually physically talk to one another, and you go out and visit a client at their premises, and the client will come into you and they'll fill out a form and you'd agree something and shake hands and get on with life. And I was sort of halfway through my career before technology took over. And what's happened in the last 20 years, Elaine, is that certainly my sector, currency exchange, has gone completely tech mad, where 99% of the answers are purely tech-based. It's all about the algorithm. It's all about the chat box and the artificial intelligence. Now, from a business point of view, there is real logic as to why the industry has gone that way from the point of view of the business owner. Because you've got two business models to choose from, Elaine. You can invest your money once in the algorithm, you then launch, and then other than a little bit of maintenance, it's all money coming in. Or you work an old school way of hiring these things called human beings to talk to clients. But the problem with that approach is that they're not like a computer. They want to get paid every month, not just once. So from a business point of view, from a business owner's point of view, it makes a lot of sense to go technology route. And the technology, in a lot of cases nowadays, is incredibly advanced and clever. But the problem with it is two things to my way of thinking. And I guess my way of thinking is born out of the fact that for the first 15 years of my life, I did business a completely different way by talking to people. The problem with technology-only solutions for clients is that it's reactive. Now, exchange rates change every 3 seconds, night and day. That means 28,800 changes every 24 hours.
Goodness me.
Wow. You're a busy lady. You need to move some pounds to euros. In between your appointments, you think, oh, I'll phone the bank or I'll go on my app at 10 o'clock on Thursday morning because that's the only time I've got available. But all that will happen in that transaction is you ask for the quote, the supplier offers you the rate of exchange available at that moment in time, you take it or leave it. That's it. What we do at Cosmos is we will do a discovery session with the client to find out what they're looking at doing and the time frame they're looking at doing it in. And then within the client's chosen time frame, we will monitor the markets. So for instance, if you were looking to buy euros and we had spoken, a month ago, I would have said to you, look, good news, because, on the 7th of March this year, we had a 6-year high on pound against the euro. It was the best time since the Brexit referendum vote to buy euros from the pound. In the following 7 days, the pound dropped 3 cents. So if you were moving £100,000 to buy a property in Portugal, that's £3,000 you've lost out on in a week.
Yeah, goodness, that's a lot of money, isn't it?
That's a lot of money. So, we are not Philistines at Cosmos. Technology is very advanced and properly used can save time and money, but we treat it as a tool, not as a god. So the idea of Cosmos is to fuse the best of the old school, i.e. have a personalized service, talk to our clients, have an individualized program for each and every client that's suitable to their needs, not a one-size-fits-all a technology solution.
That's it's encouraging with the old-fashioned service, which the young people today haven't got a clue about, not a clue, and they would say it's a waste of time, and because they're so indoctrinated into money is God.
Yeah, I always muck about with clients to say, it's almost counterintuitive, isn't it? But if you want to go to a pub and you want a nice quiet spot, it's kind of counterintuitive to think, but the best quiet spot in a pub is probably a table next door to a table of youngsters, because they'll all be sitting around the table texting one another rather than actually talking.
Yeah, goodness. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
So I think certainly even in the 20 years that I've worked for people, for banks and brokers before setting up 𝘂𝗵𝗁, Elaine, I've always found if you give most human beings a choice of dealing with another human being or self-service technology on the answer, they'll always choose the first option.
Yeah, absolutely.
The trouble is my industry doesn't often give them a choice, but we do. It is a gap in the market, but it's a gap in the market that nobody's rushing to fill because they haven't got the skill set. Because if you think about it, most young bucks in the city of London now are in their 30s. That means they don't know working life before the internet. That's all, like you said, they don't know anything else. So they don't know how to speak to people. They've never done it. Yeah.
It's a shame. I mean, we won't talk to how to speak to people and about life at school, but we just got on with it, didn't we? So it was common sense, and you were in the position, you just did it. So there was no, well, it was just so different. It really, you know, when I think about my grandchildren today, in fact, my grandson, my youngest grandson is 18 today. And I remember I was babysitting one time many years ago, and they both turned around to me and said, "Mama, you don't understand. We've grown up with this technology." Because they were saying about, oh, they're bored and the internet had gone down. And I said, well, you know, we'd do this and that, and family holidays with my mum, you know, all the different generations would be in a caravan somewhere, we'd be playing cards or, you know, dominoes or Ludo or something like that. So they did know about that, and but it's you know, a rarity and a novelty, but to be like that every day of the week, you know, they can't comprehend it. So I think we're lucky that we've got the old and the new together.
Yes.
But you know, it's going to be totally different. I mean, the kids born today, I mean, they're more or less born with an iPad in their hand, aren't they? I mean, it's quite sad.
They are. That's right. Well, I've got a 14-year-old, or should be 14 next month, teenage daughter, and to her technology is completely natural. But as you said, quite rightly, we live in Cornwall, so power cuts and that are not unusual down here because of the strong winds and and what have you. And if the internet goes down, you know, it's the end of the world for, you know, for me, it's a business inconvenience.
Yes.
You know, it's frustrating because you could be on a Zoom call or, you know, what have you, but you just, it's a power cut, you get on with it, you know. But for my teenage daughter, it's like the world has ended. And you think, you know, you can get your skateboard out, you can play with a dog, you can do 1,000,001 things.
Absolutely.
You know, read a physical book.
Oh God, that's a novelty, isn't it? Yeah, that's a novelty. I mean, even books. We were talking before we came on the call about audio books. I mean, I think that's a blessing because I love reading and learning, and I listen to audio books as well while I'm poodling about and doing things. I'll be in the car. I was really proud of myself the other day. I had a girly lunch, met some girlfriends, and it was the restaurant was a 40-minute drive from most of us, so we all rendezvoused at this lovely place. And I thought, 40 minutes there, 40 minutes back. I want to listen to something. I want to learn something while I'm doing it. And I was listening to whatever it was. So I got my mobile dongle with my unlimited SIM card in it. I'd got my laptop that was all charged up, and then I'd got my phone. So I'd got the sat nav on my phone. I'd got the whatever it was I was listening to, the audio book on my laptop, sat on the passenger seat. And I thought, yeah, how cool is this?
Absolutely. I had a long business drive last month, the beginning of this month, from Truro in Cornwall to Weston-super-Mare, and it was about 3.5 hours each way. I, again, you know, I was sort of connected by Bluetooth, so if clients called in, I could answer the phone and what have you. But other than that, I was listening to audiobooks, and it's great, you know. I mean, you can get almost got like 80% through one book in one day. I mean, that's brilliant. Good going. I like that.
Absolutely. It reminds me of way back in the day, after I came, I can't think why I would be traveling around. Oh, I know. Yes. So I was working at a law firm, and I was giving lectures on money laundering to lawyers. It was pre-1993 money laundering regulations came in, and nobody was taking any notice of it. And there was all the high regulation things that needed to be taken. So I took it upon myself to read up on it created a seminar webinar thing. I was vice chair of the the Institute of Legal Cashiers and Administrators in the UK. So I put on these shows, as it were, to educate the lawyers, and we were working in that industry, all volunteer, but I loved it. It was going out and meeting people and so on. And I did 27,000 miles in 1 year.
Wow.
And I was also listening to a lot of tapes, the old cassette tapes where you put your pencil in and you wind it around because it gets all a bit. So I did loads of learning then, and my so that was the kind of an audio book introduction, but it was a cassette tapes, right? Driving around.
Yeah, same here. Here, cassette tapes of sort of self-help books and motivational books and things. Yeah, it's funny, because again, going back to that young boy in Africa, I've always loved reading. So how many times did I hide a book and a torch underneath my bedclothes?
Yeah.
When mum and dad said lights out, okay then, wait half an hour for them to fall asleep and then read into the small hours, with a torch underneath the bedclothes.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant, excellent.
That's why the eyesight. I wore glasses for many years. I wonder why.
I used to wear glasses, but I take live organic wheatgrass every day. And after about 3-4 months or so of taking that, which I continue every day now, I don't wear glasses to drive, to computers, to nothing.
Amazing.
Yes. Yeah. Highly recommend
My
that.
eyesight has improved because I'm short-sighted. So as I've got older, my muscles have relaxed.
Right.
So my short-sightedness has diminished. So I only wear glasses now to drive or at the cinema or to watch TV.
Right.
But everything else. Whereas my wife is the first thing she does in the morning and is the last thing she does at night is put them on and take them off.
Yeah.
My father-in-law is partially blind, so there's completely different dimension there.
Yes.
My eyesight has improved as I got older.
Do you still keep in touch? Do you still keep in touch with any of the Jamaican grandmas, although maybe they may not be with us any longer, or the people that you mix with at school?
Yeah, no, I don't. I know that there was quite a few of my classmates, shall we say, you probably understand the expression "I've done porridge."
Oh right, okay, yes, yeah, Pentonville and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Because in that environment, you do what you have to do to survive, and quite often, the first answer might not be a completely legal answer, shall we say? Yeah. So, but I've met a few. In my 17 years in the city of London, I then. When I separated from my first wife, I had a flat in Leytonstone.
Yes, yeah, I lived there too.
Which again was great because there's only 4 tube stops on the Central Line to Liverpool Street for work, so it was cheap and great and easy, and certainly the hours I worked in the city of London was quite useful to be that close. And so occasionally I would meet people that I'd gone to school with on the tubes and or walking around at lunchtime to do some errands or what have you. But yeah, no, interesting days. But I'm glad. I really enjoyed my time there. But I'm equally glad that I now live in Cornwall, should we say?
Yeah.
As you are living in Portugal.
Exactly. All these things that happen to us, they're stepping stones, they're reasons, they're stepping stones, they're lessons. They're ways to raise us up or to level us or whatever the lesson is that we need to learn. How come you ended up in Cornwall then? So why Cornwall?
Why Cornwall? That is purely 100% down to my very clever wife, who was born and raised next door to us in Dagenham in Essex. But all her childhood holidays were caravanning and camping in Cornwall. So when we decided to start a family, we met in the City of London. When we decided to start a family, London had been great, but we knew it wasn't the place for us to start a family in. So she said, come down to Cornwall. It's a lovely place. And I said, where on earth is that? And that was 17 years ago. And we came down here and never left. And what's not to like? Lots of beaches,
I love Cornwall.
countryside. Not too many humans. Great.
Yeah, brilliant. Like Portugal. It's yeah, it's interesting, all these different sort of coincidences or synchronicities, similarities, whatever you want to call them. I used to go down to Cornwall frequently, and I'm very fond of the area too. Yeah, wonderful. So whereabouts are you in Cornwall?
We're now in 𝘂𝗵𝗵𝗁, which is quite convenient for sort of, you know, the sort of life's basic necessities. But for the majority of the time, we lived in a little village 3 miles in from Land's End. So we really were out in the middle of nowhere. And again, that was a fantastic spot for anybody that likes astronomy and that, because of the dark skies.
Yes.
Right on the edge of a little village. And I only had to walk like 200 yards. But even in 𝘂𝗵𝗵𝗁, to be honest, Elaine, I can get in my car and drive 15-20 minutes to St Agnes, which is a designated dark skies.
Yeah. Wow.
And park in the top car park. And, you know, you've got a canopy above you. When it's not raining, which is not very often in Cornwall. That's the downside to Cornwall. You know, you see all these programs on TV about Cornwall and it's all beautiful sunshine. And when it's nice, it really is amazing. But for every one nice day, shall we say, there are a few rainy, stormy, windy days. In fact, a few weekends ago, one of our friends, neighbours who lived like 10 houses down from where we used to live in this village I've just mentioned, lost 140 slate roof tiles.
Oh, goodness.
In one Saturday morning. So it's a bit extreme, Cornwall. It's part of the reason why I like it, because it's fresh and quite natural and hasn't been completely overtaken by man. But when it blows, it blows.
Brilliant. Yeah, I just love all the nature and the countryside, and of course you're not far from the sea either now. So with the Indian Ocean, Cornish coastline.
Yeah, absolutely. Slight difference in temperature, yeah. And as my daughter remembered, last time we went to Portugal was the year before COVID, so 2019. And on the airplane on the way back, Susie, my wife, asked her, you know, what's your favourite bit of the holiday? Thinking, you know, particular beach or a particular attraction that we gone to or whatever. And without hesitation, she says, splashing Dad with cold water.
Oh.
Why is that then? Because he cries like a 5-year-old girl.
Oh.
Okay, there you go. I have my uses.
Oh, bless. Well, it's been fabulous.
Cold water is something else. That's not cold. That's like Arctic. Well, at least it is for me.
It's been fabulous hearing about your life story, snippets of your life stories. I'm sure there's lots and lots more in between all of what we've spoken about today. But it's been lovely spending time with you today, Tony. And thank you for the economics lesson on the currency. And you're definitely my go-to currency person. As you know, I'm referring you like hotcakes. So
you certainly are. Thank you very much for your referrals, Elaine, and thank you for inviting me on this morning. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome. Thank you.